guys have heard of Democracy in America by de Tocqueville? He wrote it in 1835. It's actually, I didn't know this until I did my own research, but de Tocqueville was Lafayette's grandnephew or great nephew. Lafayette, the general who, if we hadn't been here, we probably wouldn't have won the war. But listen to this quote he wrote Democracy. He's a brilliant guy, absolutely brilliant, incredibly insightful and perceptive. Here's a quote from him, because this answers your question. How did this happen? How did this centralization occur? Hence, it is chiefly in war that nations desire and frequently need to increase the powers of the central government. All men of military genius are fond of centralization, which increases their strength. And all men of centralizing genius are fond of war, which compels nations to combine all their powers in the hands of the government. Thus, the democratic tendency that leads men unceasingly to multiply the privileges of the state and to circumscribe the rights of private persons is much more rapid and constant among those democratic nations that are exposed by their position to great and frequent wars than among all others. So the reason the United States has lost their power in the centralization of the government compared to Switzerland, which has not fought a war in 600 years and still retains their federal system, their bottom-up system. Has anybody ever heard of the president of Switzerland's name? Nobody even knows the guy exists. He has no power because all the power is in the cantons, in the local communities, and the cantons. And they've all got guns. Absolutely. Power of the purse, power of the gun, power of the sword. So there was part of this is to get us into war. So within how many years did it take for the Federal Reserve, the international bankers, to get us into a war? From 1913 to what? 3 years? About a year or two, we were in a war. And what paid for that war? The income tax. So this is you know what? It's all common sense. It's all quite simple, really, when you understand who they are, what they've tried to do. So they got to keep us at war. Let me ask you this question. What is the best war that you could have if you were one of them?
Terrorists.
A war that never ends and can be fought anywhere in the world, and anybody can be called a terrorist. It's the perfect war. Yeah.
And they've already got it planned out.
Yeah.
There's government programs, I mean, it's out there on the web called Urban Warfighter 2025, and it coincides with Weather Modification 2025. They plan on having perpetual war.
Yeah. They have to have it because otherwise people are going to get organized.
War creates debt.
Yeah. And war creates debt. Yeah.
Do you know if the amendment to the Constitution that put the Federal Reserve in was ever ratified by the states?
Well, there was not an amendment to the Constitution to put the Federal Reserve in. There was an amendment to the Constitution to put the income tax in. So there was just, pardon me?
It was never ratified.
No, but he asked the question about the amendment to put the Federal Reserve in. As Ron Paul states very clearly, the Federal Reserve was put in by a law. Basically, Congress put it in. Congress can pass a law and kick it out. That's simple. There was no Federal Reserve, or no amendment that put the Federal Reserve in.
Exactly.
The 16th Amendment was the one that put the thing about direct taxes versus indirect taxes. But they actually had it written to say direct taxes versus indirect taxes, and then they realized they couldn't do that because the Supreme Court could, at some point, declare it unconstitutional.
75% were required to ratify it?
Right. Let me get off. Let me finish this point, though. What they did is they wrote it, the 16th Amendment, so that it was the income tax that they could put in. And the reason they did that is because there was already a Supreme Court decision on the books that's saying that the income tax was an indirect tax. You see that there's subtlety there? But the thing never was passed anyway.
But it doesn't apply to us anyhow.
It doesn't apply to you anyway. And then the 17th Amendment, that was the other. 1913 was a banner year for the power elite.
Right.
Number 1 was the income tax. Number 2 was the 16th Amendment. Number 3 was the 17th Amendment. 17th Amendment was just as important, if not more important, than the other two.
What were the 16th and 17th?
Okay, 16th Amendment was the income tax being allowed to be assessed directly on the people, rather than without apportionment. Correct. 17th Amendment was changed the way senators were appointed. You see, senators were appointed by the state legislatures until 1913.
Right.
Because the founders knew that the states would have an interest in keeping the federal government from growing and usurping their power, the state's power. So it did work that way to some degree. A hell of a lot better than having elected senators has worked.
Yeah.
So that they knew exactly what they were doing. This all happened in 1913. Woodrow Wilson was a total puppet. He was put into power by the central bankers. Jekyll Island, which were you in Jekyll Island too?
No.
I was in Jekyll Island
House was a
too.
communist.
Yeah. Who?
1913, it was
Oh yeah.
17
Oh yeah.
Amendment.
Roosevelt was a communist. So the thing is they were all these guys were communists. Wilson was a communist. He was a socialist, communist. Same thing. What?
Just to change it for a second, because it's topical, how are people going to fill out their census? Or are they going to fill it out? I mean, I don't
Well, you
know
don't
what
have to. There's a really good YouTube I just saw the other day stating very clearly that we do not have to, the only thing we have to answer is how many people live at our house.
When it gets into
That's
ethnicity and
about-
race, just put it.
Yeah.
Leave.
You don't have to.
Exactly what I'm going to.
Yeah, that's all you have to do. Okay, and you should tell them that. You just ask them, where does it say in the Constitution that I have to tell you anything about how many people live here?
I have a neighbor, she's 12, and
Yeah.
school's telling them all they have to fill this out.
Of course.
Their
That's
parents.
what the money for funding for the
They
school.
want
If anybody thinks the schools are anything but an extension of the government, a part of the government, you guys know that.
What is this
So-
I hear that the central banking originally was only meant to last 99 years?
Well,
Less than that.
yeah. Well, okay. Well, the first bank we had a certain amount of years in charter. Jefferson ended that first bank. Then, right around the War of 1812, the second central bank was created. Now, the great story, if you want to read it, is in the American Lion, biography about Andrew Jackson.
Yeah.
Okay, and you want to read this because it is. Even my wife read this. My wife is apolitical because I'm so political. You understand balance?
Yeah.
We've been married.
Yeah.
Our 40th anniversary is coming up here in a couple months, by the way.
No, you
Yeah.
can't be that old.
Yeah, I was 2 when I got married. Well, I'm 60, believe it or not.
No.
Yeah, I don't believe it. So, you know,
He has a good diet.
I have a good diet. Sylvia and I have the same diet. Oh, she eats about 4 times as much as I do. I'm not kidding. She comes up and she got this huge plate of salad. And then she eats that, and a few minutes later, here she comes with another one.
It didn't help over there.
But you know, she and I ordered the vegetarian meals and the salads, and you know, we try to stay healthy.